Adjunct Professor Moran, Macroeconomics 111. In this session and the next session, we're going to be talking about criticisms of fiscal policy. In this session, we're going to focus on one in particular called the net export effect. Fiscal policy and monetary policy will both affect interest rates. This will cause investors to change the amount of U.S. securities they buy. At higher interest rates, people can invest any country in the world, and they'll follow higher interest rates to get a higher profit. To buy these securities in a country with higher interest rates, they'll have to get that currency, which will increase the demand for that currency. Right? And that's going to affect demand for exports and imports. So this will cause investors, as a result of the change in interest rates, it'll cause investors to change the amount of U.S. securities they buy. This will cause the value of the dollar to change, because investors can buy either U.S. or foreign investments. Each must be paid for with local currency, and investors will try to follow the higher interest rates in different countries around the world, demanding the country's currency with the higher interest rate. And as a result of the change in exchange rates, the demand for imports and exports will change. This impact on imports and exports will have an impact on net exports, one of the four components of aggregate demand. Because fiscal policy and monetary policy impact interest rates in opposite ways, given either expansion or contractionary policy, they will impact net exports in opposite ways. We're going to talk about monetary policy in a later unit. Monetary policy is when the government changes interest rates and the supply of money in order to manage the economy. Fiscal policy is when the government changes taxing and spending to affect the economy. Interest rates move with price level when we're discussing fiscal policy. You have to remember the definition of the interest rate effect, one of the three reasons an aggregate demand slopes downward. The interest effect points out that for any one aggregate demand curve, the supply of money is fixed or constant. Because only in monetary policy do you change the money supply. If the price level goes up, to maintain the same standard of living, consumers will need more money. But the money supply is constant. So if the demand for money goes up, with the supply of money being constant, this will cause the price of money, which is interest rates, to rise. Okay, so how does this pan out? Assume we're in a recession. The government increases spending as part of expansionary fiscal policy and sends us into the intermediate range. The new equilibrium is an intermediate range. That's going to cause a higher price level than existed at our recessionary equilibrium. This higher price level will increase the demand for money as people see their real income fall in the face of higher inflation. They will attempt to borrow money to maintain that standard of living, which causes interest rates to rise. As interest rates rise in the United States, investors overseas will attempt to buy more U.S. securities to get the higher return on an investment. They will need to buy our securities by using dollars. They will exchange their currency for our currency. The higher demand for the U.S. dollar will cause the dollar to strengthen, an appreciation of the dollar. Now, when it comes to XN, when the dollar appreciates or gets stronger relative to other currencies, imports look comparatively cheap, so our imports will rise, which is a negative impact on XN and aggregate demand. But the appreciated dollar will cause consumers, foreign consumers, it will cause them to see our goods as looking more expensive because it will take more of their currency to buy our currency. As a result, they'll buy less of our goods. Our exports will fall, which is a negative impact on XN and aggregate demand. The net effect of a decrease in exports and an increase in imports is to reduce the impact of expansionary fiscal policy. So the government pushes us out here. There is a disequilibrium. Aggregate demand is shifted to AD, full employment. The interest rate effect pushes us back to this equilibrium. The net export effect shifts us out this way. Okay. Here's the cause and effect chain that we just discussed. Recession, expansionary fiscal policy, an increase in G, decrease in T. It results in a higher price level. It results in a higher interest rate as people demand more money to maintain the purchasing power they had before the change in inflation. The higher interest rate will attract foreign investment to the United States. Since they have to buy our investments with dollars, it will cause the dollar to appreciate, to get stronger. To U.S. consumers, imports look comparatively cheap, so we'll buy more imports, which is a negative to our aggregate demand. To foreigners, it looks like our goods got more expensive, so they won't buy as many of our exports, which is also a negative to XN in aggregate demand. The net effect of a decrease in exports and an increase in imports is to reduce the impact of expansionary monetary policy. It is an unintentional and counterproductive impact of expansionary fiscal policy. The opposite would be true with contractionary. How does a change in the dollar affect people's desire to borrow, to buy U.S. goods or services? Let's assume this is the U.S. dollar and these are euros, and you can buy a Chevy for $20,000 or a 20,000 euro VW. Let's assume these currencies trade at parity, $1 to 1 euro. If the dollar appreciates, then $1 can now buy 2 euros. That's what it means to appreciate. The dollar buys more foreign currency. Since $1 buys 2 euros, it only takes $10,000 to get 20,000 euros. So it looks like instead of paying $20,000 to buy a 20,000 euro car, it only takes $10,000 to buy the 20,000 euro car. The price of the car in Europe hasn't changed. It's just that our currency buys more of their currency. As a result, when the dollar appreciates, we'll buy more imports. To them, it would take 40,000 euros to buy a $20,000 American car. So our exports will fall, and XN would decline. That's the impact on our imports and exports. But we're going to be explaining this initial change in the exchange rate by the impact that interest rates has on attracting foreign investors' investments to the United States when price level and as a result interest rates go up to fight a recession, or when price level and interest rates decline to fight inflation.